Cloverfield, a 2008 found-footage sci-fi horror movie that follows a group of friends through the streets of New York as they try to survive the onslaught of a vicious giant monster attack taking place over the course of one night. Every moment is captured through the eyes of a handheld video camera, all shot from a first-person perspective. Around the time found footage was back on the rise, with movies like Grave Encounters, Wreck, and The Fourth Kind. This movie shocked audiences with its clever marketing and fresh new concept. Saying all that, I feel this is the best movie of the franchise, and it feels weird to say the word franchise, as every installment after this takes a different genre approach, while still being connected to its own universe called the Cloververse. And with the new movie, The End of Oak Street, a lot of speculation online seems to think that this is connected to the Cloververse as well, but I'm not here to talk about that. As always, I'm here to make concepts of things that don't exist, and I think it's about time that this movie gets its own video game adaptation. Hey guys, before we continue, I know I hate to ask this, but can you guys please look at subscribing to the channel? I know it's been a while, but this keeps you guys updated with my future videos whenever I decide to post them, and I do promise I will plan to make more videos every month, and potentially in the future, every week. So first things first, what sort of game are we going to make for this Cloverfield adaptation? I think it's safe to say the only appropriate answer is a first-person horror game. Shocking, I know. But honestly, it seems like the best possible genre to give fans what they want. It could follow a new group of people in the same position as the people from the movie. A birthday party in New York, for example. For the most authentic feel, I think it needs to be single player. I don't know about you guys, but in recent years, I feel like a lot of horror movie or movie adaptations that are focused on horror always try and do the multiplayer element and try and copy like the Dead by Daylight clone. We've had Friday the 13th, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm pretty sure the new Halloween movie is also kind of adopting that, but also having its own single player mode. However, the problem I find with these games is they kind of peak on release and then slowly die down. Like when the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game came out, I played it for like a solid 2 weeks with my fiance and haven't touched it since, and I saw the player base spike because it was on Games Pass and then quickly dip down. I feel like these games are good concepts, but you need to think about longevity, and there just isn't a lot of longevity. I feel like these games are only going to be short windows of popularity. And by the way, I'm not saying that these games are bad by no means. I enjoyed Friday the 13th. I know it's got still a very loyal cult fan base who make private servers. Same with all the other games I mentioned. I'm not saying these games are bad, but I think that single player is better because it focuses solely on you. You're the one trapped, you're the one who needs to survive. I feel like if you want to make a fun horror game, multiplayer, single player for the actual horror aspect. And I feel like with the origins of this movie, I think that first person is definitely the place to go. Speaking about all that though, we need to think of an interesting story to get the game hooked. It doesn't have to be a shot-for-shot remake of the movie, which I know a lot of fans would love. I feel like it could be its own somewhat original story where you play as a friend invited to a party, much like Hood in the first movie, who is separated from his wife and kids, and you're invited there to cheer yourself up. However, your friend, who's a bit of a dick, decides, hey, you're going to film the party, we're going to have a good time, and kind of leaves you on your own. As you go outside to take in the view and think of a way to save your marriage, you feel a giant earthquake, pull the camera out, only to see a giant explosion and debris comes towards you. Debris hits the building, you wake up and the game officially starts. There is similar game concepts out there. For example, there was a Godzilla game only released in Japan titled City Shrouded in Shadow. However, this is a more third-person game, but I still really want to play it. If I could get my hands on a PS4 copy of it, I would love to play it. You play as a character who is in the middle of a kaiju attack and you need to survive the onslaught, but it's all third person. There is also the multiplayer game Headliners, where you play as journalists in the city of monsters. However, this is a more comedic and cartoon styled game. The closest I could find for this idea was a game called Mega that's on Steam, a first-person horror game where you navigate a ruined city after a monster attack. Though these are all close, I think Cloverfield having an official horror game done right and having that darker, grittier tone could be a great addition to the already growing film adaptation games that are coming out in recent years, such as Hellraiser, Blair Witch, and A Quiet Place. But enough about those games, let's get back to making our own, yeah? Let's talk about mechanics, the lifeblood of the game itself. We need good mechanics to hook the player to play it. We've already talked about the main part of the game being first person, so you will have a camera to film everything. You navigate through damaged apartment rooms, jumping over gaps and finding your friends. You need to collect batteries to keep your camera going. You also have a night vision mode for areas that are dark and hard to see, mimicking similar mechanics from the Outlast franchise. Like that franchise, there will be collectibles in the form of shots, graffiti points, and interesting documents which you can review in your journal for deeper lore. That's all well and good, but we need the horror element. We're playing a horror game. Where's the horror? Right now, all we've basically made is a parkour simulator with collectibles. We need something that's going to scare the players and make players afraid, right? Well, don't you worry your pretty little heads, because I've thought of all this stuff, because I have too much time on my hands. The horror will come from multiple angles, such as crawling through debris in tight apartment blocks, trying to keep your sanity under control in stressful situations, like Amnesia: The Dark Descent, whilst trying to hide from enemies in crawl spaces and behind objects, similar to Alien Isolation. And speaking of enemies, there's going to be multiple different types. I know you guys are thinking multiple different types, but this is a movie about a big monster in the city. Well, we need more threats than that, because the monster can't always be around us at all times, you know? They weren't in the movie, they're not going to be in this. With this being based on the movie, there are things in this movie called HSPs, or for those unfamiliar with that term, human-sized parasites. These spider crab, dog-looking, spider, arachnid, demon-looking things that attack and mutilate humans. If you're lucky enough to survive, or unlucky enough to survive the encounters of one of these things, the after effects could be fatal. If you know, then you know. The game could have you escaping from them through dark areas like in the movie, using your night vision camera to see through dark subway tunnels that have lost power, throw rocks to create noise, and hide in small areas. These sections are very stealthy, similar to other horror games. Again, like I mentioned, the enemies in Outlast, you had to be very careful not to be seen. Alien Isolation, throwing noisemakers to make sure you weren't killed. Apart from HSPs though, the military could be another threat, trying to keep the infection under control from the HSPs, or just all-out martial law breaks out. Because of paranoia, the military are trying to contain the incident and take out any civilian on site who isn't compliant. This could be the same with looters and random infected humans, as they attack you out of fear, impulse, or an infected brain. With the more human characters though, I think it would be a bit more like Condemned and Alien Isolation, where you could actually fight back against these guys with pipes, 2x4s, or anything you could find. But it depends if I wanted to go more down the Outlast route where you have no weapons and you need to run and hide, or you have the Alien Isolation method where you can take out anything that's humanoid. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below what you think would be better suited for this game. But now we've got the humans out of the way and we've got the HSPs and looters and infected people, I feel like we need to talk about the giant ass elephant in the room, Clover itself. Obviously, it's a threat, as you would need to avoid falling debris and objects that it's been throwing, much like the Statue of Liberty head that you see in the movie. Its giant body waving and stamping around, hitting and screaming, could also blow you away depending how big that Clover is. If it has a shockwave shout, it depends how strong this thing is. And you would basically need to navigate through the city, trying to plot out your route on where to go and how to get out of there. Your goal is basically run, hide, and survive. As we mentioned before, the story could follow a solo protagonist trying to get back to his wife and kids. Though I feel for a bit of extra flavour, I think there would be key points in the story where some basic choices could affect the ending, such as saving a friend or letting a friend fall or be attacked, taking out an infected person and leaving them to become infected, or something as simple as choosing your route to get out of the city, as these could play a factor into getting different endings, a good ending, a bad ending, and a mid ending. It offers replayability and the chance to flush out the lore more. Saying that though, I think I need to talk about the true ending or the best ending in the game. You manage to get on a boat or a seaplane of some sort. As you get further away, you can see New York in an orange glow of fire, as the military decides to drop a small hydrogen bomb on the city to take out Clover. As you see this from a great distance, you think you're out of harm's way, you were hit by a shockwave that knocks you off course, and that's where the game could end. However, in a post-credit scene for the good or true ending, would reveal you wash up on a shore with the camera still running as you see New York on fire from a distance, where you hear once more a final roar from Clover, indicating that it's still alive. Keeping with the original theme of the movie, I thought leaving it ambiguous for the player to have survived the crash. And over the credits would play a 911 call towards the end, where your ex-wife or partner is calling to see, "Have you seen my husband?" To which, if you get a bad ending, you hear the words, "We cannot find him." Whereas if you get the super secret good ending, you hear a police officer respond with, "Ma'am, we found him and he's okay." But I'm not letting you guys know which is the canon ending. There is a canon ending. This is just more for the people that want a happy ending. This could be the canon ending, but I'm not going to let you guys know if it is. But now we've talked about genre, story, endings, characters, progression, mechanics. We've spoken about so much, but who's going to make the game? I think it's only fair we find the right studio for the job. Personally, I'm torn between two studios, and I'm going to tell you what they are now. The first one is Red Barrels, the guys responsible for the iconic Outlast series, who are still going strong today with Outlast Trials. These guys are pioneered in the first-person horror camera perspective game style. I feel like there's no other people that can come close to what these guys have achieved. And I feel like with them having such knowledge, they could tailor it and make it a bit more grittier, gorier, and more brutal, which could play well into the strength of the Cloverfield game being made. However, there's also one other studio that pops into mind, and that's Creative Assembly, the guys who made Alien Isolation, which I still put down as one of the best horror games I've ever played. And considering that we are getting a sequel, I don't know if it's by the same company, but considering there's talks of a sequel to Alien Isolation, about over 10, 15 years, however long it's been, you don't get that sort of praise and demand and longevity if you make a bad quality product. And considering Alien Isolation blends a lot of different mechanics and has a really great story, I feel like these guys are also a very high contender. The only thing that lets them down is they've never really done the first-person camera mechanic before, but I'm sure with their expert knowledge, they could make something great. Now we've gone through all the fantasy stuff, let's go through the realism stuff. The doomy gloomy side of stuff that I never really like to talk about when I make these videos. I would say, to be honest, this could be actually plausible rather than impossible, and the reason I say that is looking into the production company who made Cloverfield, Bad Robot Productions, also has their own video game division. They're only making a small handful of games and currently working on 4 Loop, which I think is a former Left 4 Dead developer, making a game with J.J. Abrams. Like, that's quite nuts to say in a sentence. Can't really rule it out that these guys have their own production company, own the IPs, so they could basically make their own game because they have their own production company. And if they didn't want to do it all themselves, they could co-dev with one of the 2 studios I've spoken about, Red Barrels or Creative Assembly. Also, when I was researching this on Wikipedia...
Wikipedia? You're using Wikipedia as your source of information?
Bad Robot's looking at making a Portal movie, which is also quite insane to say. So that's quite cool that this is a more plausible potential idea that I've had. But before we get all excited about this, I think the main thing to take away will be, would the game meet demand? As looking into some of the previous horror games such as Blair Witch and A Quiet Place, I don't think their games would financially do well compared to the ever-expanding catalogue of games. Basically, would this be a return investment for the company? Why would they waste all this time if it's not going to be a return investment for them? I think with a bit of clever marketing, maybe re-releasing the movie in theatres would be a good move. Also, according to their Wikipedia page, again, another Cloverfield movie is in the works, yet to be announced. Combine that with the right Let's Player or streamer, I think that would do a boost in numbers if you got someone like Markiplier or Jacksepticeye to play it. Also, doing an ARG campaign leading up to the game's release would also be a good move. There actually was a ARG campaign back in the day for Cloverfield if you went on their website, so I feel like they could do something else where they expand the lore again. With movies now making a lot of video game adaptations from Super Mario, Minecraft, Sonic, Silent Hill, Until Dawn, and so many more, I feel like it's time to return to form and do a reverse. Remember back in like the PlayStation 2 days or even the Xbox 360 days where you would have a movie tie-in game, and some of them were actually quite fun. I'm looking at you, Path of Neo, that game was actually super fun. There's probably hundreds I could rattle off at the top of my head. So maybe we need to do a return to form of making movies into video games again. Or maybe I'm just a fan looking for nostalgia, trying to come up with really cool ideas for things that may never happen. Anyway, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below.